Hello and welcome to another TLDR Brexit Explain video. Cast your mind back. Actually, maybe cast is too far. Drop your mind back to a couple of weeks ago. It was mid-October and the EU summit had failed to produce the results that the UK and EU were hoping for. Both sides were expecting to unveil their majestic new deal at the summit, but due to some fairly major issues in the preceding negotiations, no deal was reached. Following the summit, things weren't looking great. The EU published a statement saying that for negotiations to resume, the UK had to make the necessary moves to make an agreement possible. Basically, the EU saying that Britain should rethink its strategy and prepare to compromise before coming back to the table. The UK responded, "Nuh-uh, you guys change your strategy," and said that if the EU didn't fundamentally change their strategy, then negotiations were off. In fact, the following week, the UK even revoked Barnier's invitation to visit London for further talks. So the whole thing seemed to have fallen apart. We even made a video which questioned if no deal was the only real possibility. However, recent days have really sparked the possibility that this might not be over just yet. Negotiations restarted in London last Thursday, set to take place until Sunday, but they were extended all the way through to yesterday. Then, as if they weren't sick enough of each other already, today UK negotiators are headed over to Brussels for another round of negotiations. So the EU and UK went from having a schoolyard lovers tiff to being all over each other once again. So let's dive deeper. Let's discuss what's happening and if a deal is looking any more hopeful. Before we do, a super quick shout out to the TLDR EU channel. We posted a video over there on whether the EU needs a deal and whether European businesses will force EU politicians to cave. The channel and that video are both linked down below. Also, we only have a handful of copies of Brexit the Colouring Book left. The second edition will be out in the next couple of weeks, so we've discounted those final first editions hard. The link to the store can also be found below. Let's start by taking a look at what happened in order to restart negotiations. If both sides were demanding serious change before talks could be rekindled, surely it's a good sign that they're on speaking terms again. I mean, Johnson even said that Barnier shouldn't return unless he had a new offer which treated Britain like an independent country. Well, it seems that while Johnson may have been serious about his demands, it's always kind of hard to tell with Johnson half smirking all the time, but those around him seemed less convinced by the brinkmanship. Unsurprisingly, businesses were less than happy about the idea of a disruptive no-deal exit, with companies and business leaders on both sides of the channel encouraging the two to return to the negotiating table. And it really is businesses on both sides. Without stealing too much of the thunder from the EU video I mentioned a moment ago, which you should definitely watch, there are a whole variety of European businesses very keen for their leaders to reach a deal. And it seems that the politicians are listening. In the UK, Michael Gove was forced to admit that despite Johnson's promises that we would prosper mightily outside the EU, British businesses could be hit by big tariffs under the proposed Australia-style Brexit. In particular, he admitted the rough time that beef and lamb producers would have, hit by a 40% tariff, as well as car makers with a 10% tariff. In fact, he wasn't the only one, with Rishi Sunak, the UK's Chancellor, also encouraging Johnson to find a deal with the EU. Maybe it's somewhat unsurprising then, that despite Johnson praising the Australia-style deal that we could have, Australia are currently renegotiating with the EU to try and get a proper trade deal. Anyway, it wasn't just the UK coming under pressure. As I said moments ago, European leaders were also being jostled by their businesses and citizens to reach a deal. Merkel said that both sides needed to compromise, and Macron even admitted that French fishermen might need to be less ambitious post-Brexit. The EU's chief negotiator, Michel Barnier, also joined the chorus, saying that he hoped to restart intensified talks with Britain, remarking in the European Parliament that
Je pense, mesdames et messieurs les députés, malgré les difficultés, qu'un accord est à notre portée. Si nous sommes des deux côtés prêts à travailler constructivement et dans un esprit de compromis, si nous avançons dans les prochains jours sur la base de textes juridiques comme c'est notre souhait, et enfin surtout si nous sommes prêts dans les jours qui viennent à venir aborder et résoudre les sujets les plus difficiles.
So, if the EU are open to negotiations, and even Gove and Sunak are encouraging Johnson to return to the table, why was Johnson so certain that talks were over? Well, in the televised message, Johnson notably didn't actually say that. While he did say that now was the time to act as if a deal wasn't coming, he did leave the door open for further talks, although it was clear that he was hoping for the upper hand, remarking that the EU should only come to us if there's some fundamental change of approach. It's very possible that this was just posturing, designed to try and shake up negotiations. But even if it wasn't, it seems that the response to this announcement in the days that followed may have shaped the British position. That's because the pound almost immediately fell against the euro. British businesses immediately renewed warnings, and farmers even warned that the agricultural market was at risk of complete collapse in Britain. So maybe Britain was never walking away. Maybe Johnson's speech was only ever meant to scare the EU. Or maybe these stark warnings did spook the PM. Either way, both sides did agree to resume talks. News which, rather ironically, led to the pound jumping again. It probably wasn't the negotiations restarting that did that though. It probably helped that the EU's negotiators seemed so optimistic about a deal. Barnier remarked that a deal was within reach, and sources in the EU even remarked that the deal was more than 90% complete. That remaining 10% to be resolved? Well, regular viewers will be able to guess what these ongoing issues are before I even get there. Go on, have a guess. Yep, they're disputes over fishing rights in British waters, level playing field agreements, and mechanisms for dispute resolution, all of which continue to be the stumbling blocks in negotiations. However, it seems that both sides are returning to the table with increased optimism that these issues too could be resolved, with Barnier even remarking last week that some of the issues surrounding competition law, the level playing field, had been resolved, suggesting that even these long-standing issues might not be insurmountable. The two sides certainly are taking these renewed talks seriously though, with both sides publishing a 10-point plan to make negotiations better, the so-called organising principles. Now, I see what the government's trying to do here. They're trying to tempt me into reading a fairly dry policy paper by turning it into a BuzzFeed-esque listicle. But guys, you have to rework that title. Organising principles for further relations with the EU? Blah. How about let's try 10 life hacks to improve negotiations with the neighbour that you kind of hate? You won't believe number 6. Anyway, they've lured me in now, and I feel that considering I went on a wild tangent there, I really ought to tell you what this policy document actually says. Firstly, the document acknowledges that negotiations have formally restarted and been kicked straight into high gear, stating that parties have agreed to intensify negotiations, going on to say that talks will take place across all negotiating tables concurrently. Negotiations will take place daily, including weekends, unless both sides agree otherwise. I'm not sure who's allocating those table placements, but I'm calling shotgun on the malt table. Yes, this is a real merch item that we made. What are you going to do about it? Anyway, the document goes on to explain how negotiations will be organised, describing how various work streams will be able to take place concurrently, while overseen and coordinated by a small joint secretariat who will hold a master consolidated text. With multiple work streams taking place at the same time, focusing on these key areas, the document states that the chief negotiators and deputy chief negotiators will continue to meet together and with the various tables in order to resolve issues, meeting daily until an agreement is reached. However, the document does emphasise that regardless of progress on individual work streams, nothing is agreed in these negotiations until a final overall agreement is reached. Essentially saying that even if good progress is made in a number of streams, it's not resolved until every issue is sorted. The final points outline when and where negotiations will happen, even acknowledging the restrictions that COVID could place on negotiators. But considering the negotiations in London have already been extended since this document was published, it suggests that both sides might be taking this even more seriously than expected. So what does this current stage of negotiations and this 10-point badly named list actually tell us? Can the UK and EU resolve their differences despite both seemingly throwing a strop in the middle of the month? Well, negotiations have entered what's been referred to as a tunnel, and as the name suggests, peeking in to check on progress won't be all that easy. Charles Michel, the European Council President, might be able to give us a slight insight though, with him remarking that negotiations had hit their most difficult stage, and that Brussels was still unsure whether a deal with Johnson's government was possible. He also remarked to The Guardian that the deal was still hanging in the balance, and that we can expect talks to continue for up to 2 more weeks. Michel commented that we all know that in all negotiations, the last and final decisions are the most difficult. Will we get a deal? I don't know. It depends on what will be on the table. However, it does seem that with these renewed negotiations, a deal is certainly still possible, with the EU saying that despite the mid-October EU summit deadline, that the very latest a deal could be reached is mid-November. Any later, and it might struggle to be ratified on time. In fact, the EU seemed to have seen this coming. Months ago, EU diplomats remarked that the end of October could be a vital time for trade talks, seemingly predicting that a deal would be reached despite missing the mid-October deadline. Will they be right? Are we only days away from a deal? Well, time will tell, but with the end of October looming, we'll have to see if the UK and EU have a trick or a treat to deliver. Be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to be notified every time we post. Also, make sure that you check out the TLDR EU channel and subscribe to that channel too, for more content like the other Brexit video I mentioned earlier. Special thanks to our Patreon backers who make videos like this one possible. If you want to see your name at the end of videos just like these people, then be sure to back us on Patreon. The link to that's in the description.